here?
Recording in progress.
For this Frost Woods Historic District educational event. I'm Thor Jepson. I'm the city's assistant planner and staff representative on the city's Landmarks Commission. For disclosure, I want to say that tonight's meeting is being recorded and streamed on the city YouTube channel. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to inform residents of the Frost Woods neighborhood and the city at large about the potential nomination of the Frost Woods neighborhood as a National Historic District. So we have
including 10 homes, 3 commercial properties, 1 civic property, a religious complex, and 1 religious structure. and then one historic district. These surveys identify individual properties that are potentially eligible and historic districts. Frost Woods, of course, is the only historic district that was identified during this survey. Just to give you a sampling of the properties that were found to be potentially eligible, I don't have my notes, so I can't give you the names of these houses, but 50 Bungalow, and yes, 5805 Winnequa Road is the Owen Bungalow, otherwise known as Bungalow Inn, and some other properties, including that gas station on Monona Drive, the old Kohl's food store building, which has actually been listed since then, the Catholic Church complex, which, somebody help me, Our Lady of, sorry? Immaculate Heart of Mary, thank you. And of course, one of the Beatty and Strang houses that are so prevalent in the district. So this is the boundary that the consultant determined would be, at least initially, the boundary of a Frost Woods Historic District. It includes the original Frost Woods subdivision that you see outlined in blue, and the two subsequent additions that you see outlined in purple and green. And so those three subdivisions would be, at least initially, that was the initial determination by the consultant, was that this would be the boundary of the historic district. I did want to put up a map comparing that boundary with the current boundary of the Homeowners Association. I'm not sure what you call it. Frost Woods Home Association? Yes. Thank you. So the blue line is the southern boundary of the Home Association. So the proposed boundary of the historic district does extend a bit south of that. The final boundary of a historic district would be determined by a consultant in consultation with our office and the State Historic Preservation Officer. So the biggest benefit of being listed in the National Register as a historic district is access to the Historic Tax Credit Financing Program. This program returns, it's a state program. It returns 25% of qualified expenses to homeowners as a direct credit to your state income tax obligation. See the list of qualified expenses: exterior masonry repair, roofing, windows, painting, siding repair, systems, interior systems, including heating, ventilating, air conditioning, electrical systems, plumbing systems, and structural. Just briefly, how does the tax credit program work? Like I said, 25% of qualified expenses are returned as a credit to your income tax obligation. The property must be listed or individually eligible from the National Register or contributing to a listed historic district. So in the case of Frost Woods, any contributing property in the historic district would be eligible for the tax credit program. Work must meet standards for retaining historic characteristics. The minimum expenditure is $10,000, maximum is $40,000. Now, you're not limited to those parameters. If you have more expenditures than that you need to do on the property, you can open more than one tax credit project. So if you've got $80,000 worth of work that you need to do, for example, you can just split those costs into two tax credit programs and projects, and open two projects at $40,000 each. The same goes the other direction. If you have smaller projects, say a $5,000 furnace and a $8,000 roofing project, you can combine those to meet that minimum expenditure. There's no limit on the number of projects you can have open. There is a 5-year recapture period, so any work that you do on the property within 5 years of when you're approved for tax credits needs to meet those standards. Whether you're getting tax credits on those or not, or whether they are, no matter what the work is, all work needs to meet the standards, or our office can recapture some of that in a prorated rate. You can do the typical timeline for projects is a 2-year timeline. You can apply to do it in a phased 5-year timeline, and then phase your projects over 5 years. Eligible work can include exterior items, structural elements, interior systems, as I mentioned, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, except fixtures, just the systems in the walls until it comes out of the wall. So the tax credit program is kind of part of a process. I like to think about it as a process. We make sure your project is eligible, your property is eligible. Oh, I'm sorry. This is just the process of getting the tax credit, applying for the tax credit. Part 1, you make sure your property is eligible. So if Frostwoods were to be designated as a district, that step 1 is really easy. You just say that your project is eligible. We double check it. You send us current photos of the property. That's just to make sure that no major alterations have taken place since it was listed. We just make sure that it still has its characteristics and meets the standard for a contributing property. The second part is you plan your project. You get it approved by one of the reviewers in our office. Sometimes there may be some back and forth, some negotiation to make sure that the projects that you want to do meet the standards. Let's see. So as I said, you can do it in 2 years is the standard. You can phase it over 5 years. Do you need to open more than one project? If you have costs over $40,000, you can open more than one project. Have your plan reviewed and approved by our office before you start the work. We can't give you tax credits retroactively for work that you have done already. So make sure that you get approval and have all of your work reviewed. Once the plan is reviewed and all of your work is determined to meet the standards, and you have perhaps some conditions placed on your project that you've got to meet, then you go ahead and do the work. Once you're done with the work is finished. Part 3, you have it reviewed by our office again. Take photos of the finished work. Send those photos in with a little bit of documentation, a form. And when that work is reviewed and confirmed that it meets the standards and you did it the way you said you would do it, you'll get documentation that you can then use when you do when you submit your income taxes. Now, because Monona is a certified local government under the State Certified Local Government Program, there is grant funding available for historic preservation planning projects, including the surveys. The survey that you did in 2019 was funded by a grant from our office. The highlighted one, nominations of properties and districts to the National Register. Other projects, design guidelines to help property owners and historic preservation commissions interpret standards, historic preservation plans, education programs. But the key one is that you can get a grant from my office to do a nomination of the Frostwoods Historic District. So it would potentially cost the city or the home association no out-of-pocket funding. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our National Register expert, Elizabeth Hilton.
Thank you, Jason. So, what is the National Register? Am I echoing? Gotta put this over. Sorry, I'm hearing an echo. So what is the National Register? It is an official list of significant places. It was established in 1966 with the National Historic Preservation Act, and it is maintained by the National Park Service. Properties include districts, sites, buildings. So it could be a bridge or a monument. So Jason already showed you a couple highlights from the survey. I wanted to show you some highlights of properties that are currently listed in the National Register, which include the Bungalow Inn and Kohl's Food Store. And then we also have the Schrader House, which we are anticipating listing within the next couple of weeks. So listing on the National Register is an honorary designation. You can put a plaque on your property. It provides protection from state and federal projects, and it helps you use the historic building code. So how do you list a property? Initial consultation with SHPO, our office, is essential. We will be there to help you through the entire process. There must be proof of significance to begin the process, which we've already identified through the survey. Then there's additional research and writing of the findings on an organized National Register form. The review board then reviews the full nomination, and it is then listed on the state register. At that point, the final step is to send it to the Park Service for final approval and listing. This process can take well over a year from start to finish. Because of the survey, there's already established information that is very helpful and useful to the consultant. This can appear to be a daunting process. If you've ever seen a National Register form before, it can range anywhere from 30 pages to well over 100. Especially for a large historic district. And as Jason mentioned, many local governments seek listings to support their communities in creating historic districts, which allows for tax credits. The Park Service has established a set of 4 criteria to help evaluate properties for the National Register. The first one is association with single events, such as the founding of a town, or with patterns of events, such as education or historic trends. The next is association with individuals who had specific contributions to history that are significant to our past. This refers to individuals whose activities are important. So that includes profound politicians, town founders, or established artists like Beau Rod with the Schrader House, if anybody's familiar with that property. The next one is significance for their physical design or type of construction, and which is their architectural style. And this also includes well-known architects that are considered masters, like Frank Lloyd Wright. The last one, which is not applicable here, is archaeology, if it has the potential to yield information. So what is a historic district? So properties can be listed individually, such as a house, or as a grouping, which we refer to, oh no. Got excited. All right, a historic district. So a district is a well-defined, visually and architecturally distinctive area where you have a visual grouping of buildings in this case. Within a historic district, there are contributors, which are older buildings that retain integrity, and non-contributors, which could be newer, heavily altered, or have lost many of the features that would have made them consider them historic. Examples of historic districts around town, I'm sure you know quite a few in the Madison area. One of my favorites over there is University Heights. So let's go over some common myths. There are a lot of misconceptions about being listed on the National Register, and I just want to clear the air. All these examples will show you that you own the property and you can do what you want to do with it. If my property is listed, I must open it to the public. House museums, hotels, government properties, these are all public spaces, so they are in turn open to the public. But you can have house tours or not, it's your choice. If my property is listed, I may not paint my house a color scheme that I like. You could paint it a rainbow. The state and federal government does not care. Only the local government can care if they had that included in the review process, but the city of Monona does not have that for National Register historic districts. If my property is listed, I cannot change anything. You can remodel your kitchen or bathroom, create an addition, install air conditioning, even give your building a brand new use. As Jason mentioned earlier, through tax credits, you can do a lot of those things. Any building over 50 years or older is eligible for listing in the National Register or the State Register. You have to prove your property has significance within the 4 criteria that I established earlier. Generally, the Park Service states after 50 years, a property can be evaluated for listing. There are exceptions to extremely significant buildings. The SHPO in town listed a handful of Frank Lloyd Wright buildings before they turned 50. Properties listed in the National Register require a review by a local unit of government. This comes down to local laws only. The state and the feds are not involved with this. Monona does have a local ordinance, but there are no restrictions for residences listed in the National Register. So that last slide is a hot topic that a lot of people want to learn more about, because this is probably the largest misconception about listing your property in the National Register. So what is the difference? State and federal regulatory actions such as road widenings have to look at state and National Register properties. A property must be listed on the state and National Register in order to receive tax credits. Pulling a permit for work on a locally designated property would draw a red flag for local review if this was a local historic district. So that means a City of Monona historic district. But this is not. This is a National Register historic district. So if you're asking yourself why list your property, bragging rights, it's an honor to have your property listed. It brings pride in your community. It shows your community's history. Beautiful buildings help bolster tourism and economic revenue that goes back into your community's pockets. And also because of tax credits. So on that note, that's a lot of information. We relayed a lot of this at the initial meeting, but if there's any other questions that Jason and I can help answer, we are more than happy to take those on. On this slide, I will note this is our contact information. I've also included Paul Porters, who is the tax credit reviewer at our SHPO. So if you have any specific questions pertaining to what alterations you would like to make to your property so that you know that you can receive tax credits, we welcome you to contact him as well.
Have any questions? If you do, we'll have you speak into the mic so we can capture it
So what kind of time frame are we looking at for this?
Oh, we got 3 hours.
Yeah. No, I meant.
Use the microphone so we can capture the recording.
Sure. What kind of time frame are we looking for the designation?
Oh, well, that's really up to y'all. In order to start pursuing the tax credit or the historic district, there needs to be a majority support of the neighborhood. Once that's established, it depends on which way you move forward. Since Monona is a CLG, you could go through Jason and apply to receive grant funding to hire a consultant who can conduct the research and prepare the National Register forms and guide you through the whole entire process. Or the City of Monona, the neighborhood, can do that on their own accord as well.
The process hasn't been started yet.
There's just the interest for it.
Right. So once the process starts, how long does it take?
Well, again, it depends on, let's say you have a consultant right now. The consultant is going to review and research every single building within the historic district. That's going to take some time to do all that, to do the building permits, pull all those, look at the alterations for each individual building to determine if it's a contributor or non-contributor, provide context specific to the area and the developer who developed Frostwoods. That takes some time, and that also depends on the time frame of the consultant. And then once it goes in the queue, because we do have a backlog of properties that want to be listed on the National Register, that can take a couple review board cycles, which would be every 3 months we hold a review board meeting. And then at that point, we finalize any edits or changes that need to be made to the nomination, and it goes to the Park Service. And it's it takes 45 days once it goes to the Park Service for listing, unless they have questions. And they could always come back and ask us about contributing building or the developer or whatnot. So we generally say it could be about a year.
I'll add a little time to that.
Yeah.
If the city or the neighborhood is planning to apply for a CLG grant to do this, that's going to add some more time because the next application deadline for a CLG grant is in December.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So I have a question about what it means to meet the standards for retaining historic characteristics. If you're doing plumbing work, or, how is that? How do we understand what that means? And I have a second question about the people who are canvassed to see if they approve of this. Is that's done by the consultant?
The consultant does the initial survey and researches each individual property to determine if it retains integrity or not, so if it still retains those original character-defining features. And that does not mean that everything has to be perfectly intact to the day that it was constructed. It just means overall it still retains its design elements and the specific features that help make that property stand out for that architectural style. So does that answer your question regarding integrity of the building?
Your language was meet standards for retaining historic characteristics in order to get the tax credits.
Yes.
That's what I'm wondering.
Oh.
What that means.
So that's the architectural integrity that I just
Okay.
spoke of.
I see.
But it's also, there's flexibility. Obviously, you need to be able to modify your home to make it functional and work for you. So you can have add additions, which additions are not covered under the tax credit program. But of course, additions are fine as long as they're design sensitive. So if you have a one-story house and you build a two-story addition that overcomes, towers over the first story, then it's going to lose that architectural integrity.
I can give an example right from the neighborhood. The house at Owen Road, where you're just before you get to Winnequa, there's that big house on the big lot, and then right behind it is a smaller cream brick flat roof international style house. That house has an addition on the back of it, and that addition was approved when they did the tax credit project for the whole house. So that gives you an idea of it's eligible for the National Register. It was deemed eligible. So it was able to qualify for we can get in the weeds there, but it was able to qualify for the tax credits ahead of the district. There are a couple of houses in the neighborhood. Bungalow is another one that has used tax credits. Cindy and I have used it on our house. We've used it 3 times now. Yeah, so if you have any questions, you can talk to me about what our experience is.
Is there a specific thing that you want to do to your house that we would be able to help answer a question to? If you wouldn't mind sharing.
That only applies if you're altering the house, not if you're putting in a system that can't be seen from the outside.
Right, replacing systems, plumbing, wiring,
Would not be-
HVAC systems, those are all approved.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can capture tax credits on them.
Okay, so my other question was about the canvassing of the residents in this district. Who does that?
The consultant does it, and then they take all that information and they meet with our state historic preservation officer and myself, and she is the one that delineates the historic district boundaries.
Okay, so are the people who live in homes that aren't contributing part of do they vote?
Yes, they do.
Okay,
They can still oppose listing on the National Register.
even though it would have no effect on them whatsoever?
That is correct. Yeah. It might even raise their property values.
We don't have that That's not a problem.
No, not in Monona.
So the last survey they did determine contributing and non-contributing. So why would that need to be done again?
Because some time has passed, and so we need to evaluate the property's architectural integrity again, because if some severe alterations changed, then that can change whether it's a contributor or a non-contributor. The survey is also not as intensive as a National Register nomination. That's why these nominations are so thick, because they do one-by-one property evaluations and really get into the weeds to determine, oh, that's a brand new primary entrance on there. A whole nother addition was added 10 years after it was built. They're pulling all those permits, and that could have.
But as I understand it, we already know which ones are eligible for the National Register. Within the district, the standards are different to contribute and not contribute, because many houses contribute that aren't eligible for the National Register on their own.
Correct.
So why would it be so intensive to determine contributing, non-contributing, and what does determine that? I'm just curious.
Well, it always goes back to integrity, right? So that is the number one thing we're looking at. When was the property built? What alterations has happened to the exterior of the residence? And then with the historic district, because you're not listing a property individually, you have multiple properties. So as a cohesive grouping, that helps elevate the integrity, because you're looking at the entire neighborhood and surrounding area as a whole. So that you're looking at the integrity differently. Because if it was individually listed, especially for architecture, you have to have a high level of integrity to reflect those architectural features, right? Those design elements. But as a district, you don't need as high of a standard. That's why if you think about a lot of small towns in Wisconsin or across America, they have downtown core commercial districts. And if you think about those, the ground floors, a lot of them are really mucked up. They've seen so many alterations, different merchants coming in, altering the entrances and the windows. But if you look up, a lot of the upper floors are completely intact. So if you consider architectural integrity from that standpoint, the ground floor is just so heavily altered, but it can still be a contributor because you're looking at a grouping of cohesive commercial buildings where they retain enough architectural integrity to rise them up to become a contributor.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and it's really hard to answer because you have to look at each individual building one by one, and obviously every residence is completely different.
Any other questions?
I just want to say one thing that Jason pointed out earlier in his presentation. In the first meeting, there was a question about the property, the district boundaries, and how they were delineated. Were you the SHPO that delineated those boundaries? Okay, all right. It must have been the other one. But it wasn't the current SHPO? Yeah, so we could blame it on Jim, right? No, but the SHPO delineates those boundaries. So even though the survey suggested these and the contributors and non-contributors, the current SHPO will reevaluate it because time has passed since the survey, and she will determine where it's appropriate to draw those boundaries. Oh, the State Historic, well, we work at the State Historic Preservation Office, but the big boss there is the State Historic Preservation Officer. So she runs the department, yes. And she gets to make all those big, important calls.
It's way too long to say.
We just use acronyms all day long, yeah. Is there anybody online, or?
Anybody on Zoom?
I think it's just us.
Yeah, no, not
Yeah.
mine.
I know a lot of residents weren't here or at the first meeting, but if you talk to your neighbors and bring up that we had the meeting or see if they're interested in it or not, please refer them to our website where we have a lot of information that Jim can tell you about.
Yeah, you do have a local expert here on this.
You do. So if you don't want to bother him, go to our website. You can search your property to see if there's any information listed on it, and it can tell you more information about tax credits. We've also provided some brochures and fact pages about the National Register program. So we encourage you to take those, hand them to any neighbors who weren't able to attend, and feel free to follow up with us or Thor if you have any questions.
Yeah, if you have any further questions about or need any additional resources, please reach out. You can pull up mymonona.com and look for the Planning Department or the Landmarks Commission, and you'll find my contact information there, and you can get in touch with me, and I can help get you the resources you need.
And Thor, would you remind people how to find the previous survey that was done?
How to find the 2019 survey? Yes, that is kind of buried on the City Landmarks Commission webpage, I think. That can also be something that I can, if you reach out to me, I can share it with people. I can also add it to the calendar event on the city website for this event as well, and make sure I'll also put it just front and center on the City Landmarks Commission webpage as well. I think since it'll be relevant for the next few months, we'll make sure it's easily accessible. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think with that we will wrap up. Thanks everyone for coming tonight.
Recording stopped.
Did we answer all your questions?
I got all of my questions. Yeah. I have so many.
So how long ago did you retire?
4 years.
Oh, okay.
It'll be 4 years.